Hello and welcome. Today we've got Peter Gillooli, who's the CEO of the wellness company. And today we are going to be discussing healthcare, the bird flu agenda that they want to fearmonger us with, and the global pandemic and how the FDA is contradicting themselves all the time and they're lying to us. And today we're going to dive into these topics. Now, just before we begin, you can subscribe to my Instagram channel at nicholas.veniamin, where you can follow all my daily news reels. Peter, thank you so much for joining me. How are you and what have you been up to?
I'm great, Nicholas. Thanks for having me. We've been busy here at the wellness company. As you just kind of mentioned, the bird flu has really kind of taken the media headlines by storm. We've got a ton of questions recently about what does it mean for me? Is it actually something I should be afraid of? What should I be doing to prepare for what's next?
Absolutely. Now, just before we began this interview, you mentioned how this bird flu has, killed many, many chickens. But does it have any? First of all, there's so many questions. There's who's put it out there. We know it's probably made from a lab. It's attacking animals that we eat like chickens. And the question I think most people have is it going to affect human beings or our children or our loved ones? What's your idea around this?
Yeah, Nicholas, there are so many different narratives that are woven into the bird flu story. So I'll try to unpack them one by one. So number one, the current strain of bird flu, H5N1, and your viewers will kind of remember, we see bird flu basically every 2 years, right? The media kind of runs it up the flagpole as a major concern. This current strain has been circulating for about 18 months. In the United States, it's actually kind of incited a panic among the poultry industries. And I'm not exaggerating this number. This is a real number. In the last 18 months, 93 million heads of poultry have been slaughtered to contain bird flu, which hasn't gone well. The only real winners of this are, Purdue and Tyson, the big poultry companies in the United States, because the federal government just gives them tax dollars to compensate them for having to kill chickens. But I digress there. But the bird flu has now been identified in 7 states in the United States. It has been identified in both chickens and cows. It's not lethal to cows; they recover just fine in about 2 weeks. Chickens, yeah, there's a fatality rate, and for humans, bird flu is a very deadly disease. The mortality rate is something like 30 to 40%. Fortunately, you're only really at risk of contracting bird flu if you're actually a poultry farmer. If you're actually handling these animals on a daily basis that are sick, that's when the real risk comes up. And we've had a couple isolated cases that people have recovered from, but they've all been amongst the poultry workers. But none of this has stopped, Nicholas, the mainstream media from blasting out bird flu fear mongering from the rooftops, where we've seen even outlets like the Weather Channel, of all people, running articles about bird flu and how dangerous it is, which just kind of blows my mind. And I think alludes to the fact that they're really trying to push a narrative of fear as we kind of swing into the 2024 election season in earnest.
How does that benefit the 2024 election, to them? Is it, should we be fearing or should we not be fearing?
We should not be fearing. I think it benefits the 2024 election agenda that the mainstream media pushes, because if you'll turn back the clock 4 years in 2020, they were effectively able to keep everybody indoors and away from the polls, which let Joe Biden win the election from his basement. So we look at the 2024 election, and I'm sure they're thinking, well, numbers don't look so good right now, especially if you're a Democrat. How do we kind of get these up? Well, we got to prevent people from voting. That's the logical thing to the liberal mind. So anything that they can do to enforce lockdowns, push mail-in ballots, scare people away from the polls is only going to work to their advantage. And I think that also kind of ties into another narrative that we've seen, which is everyone is sick of COVID, right? No one wants to talk about it anymore. COVID's dead. But there are some lessons that we really should learn from COVID. And I think probably the most important one of them all is that this gain of function research that resulted in the lab leak that turned into COVID, that should be illegal. Yet it's still happening, Nicholas. And here's the tie. It's happening in the United States, in the University of Wisconsin, on H5N1 bird flu. It's been happening for 2 years. And guess who is sponsoring that research? The USDA, the Department of Agriculture, and the Chinese Academy of Sciences. And it's happening right here in the United States. It blows my mind that anyone would think this is a good idea and allow it to happen, yet here we are. And Now we're left wondering, what if there's a lab leak, right? We all know bird flu itself is not really a big threat, but if they're doing gain of function research that could make it transmissible to humans, we're in a totally different situation, right? And that's really what kind of keeps me up at night and leaves me wondering, what are our leaders doing in this country to prevent this from happening, or are they actively encouraging it?
Absolutely. Now, what's going to happen to drug prices when we see Donald Trump come back in, which is what we want, which is what we're hoping for. But what would you expect to see with drug pricing with the presidency of Donald Trump?
Yeah, it's a difficult problem to predict. And I know when Donald Trump first entered the White House, he was actually the first president in, I think, 12 to 16 years that had flattened the rate of inflation around drug prices. Now, of course, when COVID happened and then Biden came into power, that was completely thrown out the window, right? I mean, we've seen rampant inflation not only in the U.S. but everywhere in the world, as prices for everything have just skyrocketed. And now you'll see the news outlets today celebrating, no, inflation is only 3%. It's like, well, what about the 25% that we just picked up over the past couple of years? Like, we haven't undone any of that yet. So really, I hope at a best case scenario, we can at least pause the rate of inflation around drug prices, because drug prices have been one of the hardest hit categories when it comes to inflation. I mean, drugs have almost doubled in the past 10 years. And that's a scary prospect for many Americans who might rely on, a chronic medication to help get them through the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, tell me about Obamacare. Why would you get rid of Obamacare today? I'm suspecting that it's very expensive. It should be free, and it's a Ponzi scheme. What do you think about that?
Well, insurance itself is a Ponzi scheme, Nicholas. And I think to start talking about Obamacare, you first have to think about like what is actually wrong with health insurance, right? Like compare health insurance to automobile insurance, right? Like health insurance is bumper to bumper coverage. You get everything covered, and that drives the cost way, way up. Whereas your car, you're only going to use your car insurance if you're in a big accident and your car needs a big repair, right? Your car insurance doesn't cover oil change. It doesn't cover dents and scratches. None of that will be applicable for car insurance. Yet health insurance, we throw the kitchen sink into it. So Obamacare, which is supposed to actually relieve the cost, you go onto the ACA's website, the cost to buy an individual policy on Obamacare is at least the same price as through an employer. And the deductibles are crazy high. I mean, I'm talking like, $4,000 probably at the lower end, which is, a pretty big bill for many American families nowadays. And it's all because, the insurance is covering everything under the sun. So they have to plan for that in their actuarial tables and how they price things out. And then on top of that, you have the added bureaucracy that insurance instills, right? You have to do billing codes. You have to, pay the government to administrate the plans. Like the costs just snowball here. And we get to a place where insurance is unaffordable. And really, when we talk about replacing Obamacare, I mean, we really need to look at the insurance industry as a whole and throw all the crap out, because the insurance industry is really one of the primary drivers of the skyrocketing healthcare costs overall in the United States. They set the prices, and the more they throw on the back end, the more overhead that comes in, the more regulation that comes in, the more small things that they're covering that really should be addressed through alternative medicine and lifestyle and things like that, really drives up the prices for everybody here and creates a system that's really not sustainable.
And they call it the American dream. I'm from London, and I know that when I come to the US, if I don't have health insurance, and anything happens to me or I need an operation, tell me, if I don't have health insurance, how will they treat me?
Well, if you decide to go through with it, because that's your first question, I mean, you're going to incur a very large bill. I mean, health insurance, or I should say health debt in the United States, actually is the largest single source of personal debt that people carry. It's larger than credit card debt. It's larger than automobile loans. It's the largest source of personal debt. And that's just telling of the situation we have here, because look, people are put in these situations, Nicholas, where, they need surgery. You're obviously under distress, right? And you're made, you're put forth a very, very hard choice. It's like, do I forego this surgery, which may save my life, or do I incur this massive debt, which is going to change my life drastically on the other side of the surgery. And keep in mind, you're now trying to make these decisions while you're under a great deal of distress, because if you're in that position, you're obviously hurting really bad. So we're put in this position where people are given basically this impossible choice that, really leaves no winners at the end of the day.
My advice, because I'm a humanitarian and I put people's health first, irrespective if you're an illegal immigrant, an immigrant, or whatever. You're a human. If you're a human being and you're about to die, I don't wish that on my worst enemy. And if you're a foreigner and you go to, even if you're a foreigner and you go to the UK and you need an operation, they will give you one right there and then. They will take it out of taxpayers' money. Okay. There's no, big bill. There's no insurance. There's nothing like that. And I think that's why we have a lot of illegal immigrants flooding in the country, which shouldn't really be allowed, really. And I know that the country is very corrupt, but I don't understand why they haven't already clamped down on that like they have in the US, which I hope they don't. And I do hope that there will be, a solution for people's healths. If we can't love each other and care of, our own healths, for one another, then my question to humanity is, what is our value? Where do you draw the line when it comes to your value? And this is the question that I have. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think sadly, one of the biggest problems that we face, and this is, irrespective of whether in the US or the UK or anywhere else in the world, it's that, we have kind of industrialized medicine and healthcare, right? The allopathic pharmaceutical model is the only kind of broadly recognized acceptable way of practicing medicine. But in reality, that's just one tool in the toolbox that we need to be utilizing here, right? And when we start thinking through people in terms of assigning them, a patient ID number and then assigning them a treatment code, right? We just start stamping out treatments that may or may not actually be the cure for your problem. I mean, they help expedite you through the system and assign you the most profitable billing for all the other third parties that are involved. But in reality, Nicholas, we need to be looking much broader at our health, especially after everything we saw through COVID. And I think if there's one silver lining from that pandemic event, it's that people woke up to the fact that, the traditional way of doing health in kind of Western society is maybe not the only way or even the best way necessarily that it can be done. People are now seeking out naturopaths and functional medicine doctors and just doing things every single day to take their health more seriously, because really the best way to save on healthcare costs is just not to get into the situation where you need to jump in the system for an emergency event to begin with, right? And I think that's really how we're going to be able to pull out of this situation, is that people start looking at their health from a more integrative approach, and they start incorporating everything from diet to lifestyle changes to supplementation to alternative medicine and therapies, right? I mean, even things like a sauna, right? Intermittent fasting, these things that have kind of been popping up over the past few years, like they offer tremendous benefits and they're basically free, right? And these little actions that we do every single day can make us much, much healthier in the long run.
Absolutely. Now, I know you. I know you're. The other thing we had discussed is that the FDA, they're contradicting. They're going back on their word with ivermectin. I think it was a political stance because Donald Trump first mentioned it. They had banned ivermectin on the shelves. People are now over the situation of this global situation, and now they're going back on their word slowly with ivermectin. Try to cover their tracks. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a funny story. So, I think for the international audiences out there, and even for the Americans, right? I think one thing that you need to understand is that the FDA does not and has never practiced medicine. That is not the purpose of the FDA. The sole purpose of the FDA is to review clinical research about new drugs and approve them for a specific use. Once that drug is approved, it's between the doctor and the patient only that decide how that drug is going to be deployed. If the doctor wants to use it for an off-label use, that's fine. That is 100% at the discretion of the doctor and at the will of the patient. The FDA, though, kind of forgot that during the pandemic. And they ran these whole misinformation campaigns where they said, you're not a horse, you're not a cow, stop trying to take ivermectin, like trying to actively discourage people from seeking the truth and having honest conversations with their doctors about treatments that actually would work. And in fact, the FDA's most liked post on Twitter ever was this post with a lady walking a horse, just kind of sarcastically saying, "You're not a horse, you're not a cow," right? And it kind of shows you the effects of that campaign and how many Americans and people worldwide were perhaps persuaded to not look into solutions like ivermectin when they got sick with COVID, right? When in reality, ivermectin has now proven in over 100 peer-reviewed studies to be one of the most effective treatments for coronavirus, but it's also not the most profitable, right? That would be the mRNA shots. So the FDA kind of pivoted to push the mRNA shots. So the FDA lost their case. A judge has ordered them to take down all of these social media posts relating to ivermectin. It's a small victory, but it's a step in the right direction.
No, it's a great way in the right direction. And you mentioned that they were trying to sway people away from ivermectin, because it's only for horses and cows. But they never considered if people out there identified as a horse or a cow, so it's a double standards. Well, one rule for this and one rule for that. It's an absolute joke, Peter Gillooli, it's been an absolute honor to have you on my show. Thank you very, very much. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the viewers before we finish?
Yeah, please go check out twc.health. That's our website. And you can support Nicholas and his show by going to twc.health/NVTV. We offer a lot of doctor design solutions. Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Drew, and multiple other very high profile, outspoken doctors during the pandemic are on our chief medical board and designed everything that we provide to customers, from the supplements to our medical emergency kits, which essentially are boxes full of life-saving prescription medications that you can have in your house for early intervention. I mentioned that earlier, that how critical it is to avoiding these catastrophic healthcare bills is when you first start feeling sick, intervene, have the medications on hand ready to take, so that you don't lie in bed for 4 days hoping that you get better and then decide you need to go to the ER. That's when bad things really happen. And we really want to kind of empower everybody to sleep well at night, knowing that they have critical life-saving medications on hand, because emergencies will always happen, and it's how prepared are you?
Absolutely. Well, the link is right below, so you can click and to learn more about the wellness company. Peter, thank you very much. And we'll speak again very soon. You take care and God bless. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nicholas.